If we want to not just survive, but thrive, we have to think about invisible things. What's going on inside of our body? What's going on in our environments? And recently, the indoor air quality world has turned more to indoor environmental quality, which encompasses so many other facets.
Welcome to Homes That Heal, the podcast that transforms your life and home into a sanctuary of health, healing, and happiness. Hi, I'm Jen Heller, a wellness educator, infrared sauna expert, and your guide to living intentionally. Each week, we'll explore a variety of wellness tools, along with detoxification, weight loss, and anti-aging tips to boost your energy and align your mind and body so you can thrive in life, not just survive. Your health is your wealth, and it all starts at home. Let's dive in and create a home that heals. Hey friends, Jen here. Welcome back to Homes That Heal. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am so incredibly excited for today's show. This is a conversation that's personal and really important to me, but I also know it will resonate and be very helpful for many of you as well. I'm talking about the air quality in your home and your work environment, how it relates to our health, and a fantastic, affordable system that can truly create a home that heals. Today, I'm speaking with Jerry McGuire, not the Jerry McGuire of Show Me the Money. We had a good laugh about that, of course. I'm sure he gets this a million times. But the Jerry McGuire, who is the president of PuriFi Labs, the Arizona-based company that has delivered the highest performing indoor air purification technology ever invented. Yes, that's what I said. Ever invented. It is incredible, you guys. PuriFi Labs is leading the charge to revolutionize indoor air quality through advanced air purification technology. And with this mission to create a healthier, high-performance environment, Jerry and his team are transforming homes, schools, commercial buildings, fire stations into spaces that actively support well-being, safety, and performance. He's also been wildly successful in maximizing impact for others in business and personal life, and has worked with and learned from some of the world's most influential leaders along the way. You may recognize some of the names: Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone, Kevin O'Leary, Damon John, and the list goes on. And he's also a frequent speaker at top industry events like Salesforce Dreamforce and AASV. Whether it's transforming the air we breathe or the way companies perform, Jerry's work is about making homes, businesses, and teams healthier and higher performing by design. This is going to be a jam-packed show today, and I'm super excited and honored to welcome Jerry McGuire to the show. Hey friends, Jen here. Welcome back to Homes That Heal. This week, we are joined by a very special guest, Jerry McGuire. How are you today? And thank you for joining us.
I'm great. Happy to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be not only a fun conversation, but this is something that's not only very important to me, but my community as a whole. For many years, I've been in the health and wellness space, and optimizing air quality, understanding the air we breathe probably is one of the most important topics, I would argue, for sure. I mean, what do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, I always have thought over the past 20 years it deserves more airtime and more conversations. I think for many reasons, not the least of which is the impact that it has on our health and well-being, but the fact that people don't realize it.
Right.
They don't fully realize it. And so many times we talk about what is happening outdoors, but we only spend 10% of our time outdoors, and we spend 90% of our time indoors. And indoors, the air quality is actually worse because what is outdoors comes indoors. Plus, we generate a lot of pollution as people, or process inside of a building, or the off-gassing of furniture and various materials and pets. So I think the first thing in order for anybody to make progress on something that they care about, like health and well-being, is to have some more awareness about the things that are affecting it. And air quality is certainly one of those.
Yeah, I think it's foundational. We just met today for the first time, which that is fun. However, I've been in the health and wellness space for about 15 years, and mold has played a factor in my health. I personally was toxic with heavy metals, mercury, and lead. That's kind of what catapulted me into the infrared sauna, detoxification. You know, I had a stroke. I was paralyzed for a few years. Yeah. I'm just sharing this with you now. So this isn't just a hobby for me. Obviously, this, to me, that was a warning shot that basically was fired at me to look at my life as a whole And the purpose and foundation of this show is to help people create a home that heals, create a space that not only can you thrive and enjoy and doesn't cause you harm, but also, heaven forbid, if you have an issue or you have something going on, you have a space where you can actually heal. The body can be in a harmonious state of healing versus constantly being inundated with all these toxic chemicals. So you mentioned furniture, carpet, pet dander, all of these things that I think, I'll say people take for granted, but we take it for granted because they're in our home, that we don't realize what the cocktail of all of that can equal to, as well as you order something online, gets delivered on the doorstep, Amazon Prime, you open it up, you're excited. We don't know where it came from, what potential things are off-gassing. So again, this conversation is very personal for me, but also it's definitely in the top 3 categories or topics that I get asked in my community to go deeper on. Like, how can we get better at optimizing? So I guess talk to me a little bit about, how did you get into this? Why are you so passionate about it?
Yeah. So admittedly, I'm not going to say it was, a very magnificent start for me getting into this industry. I mean, I was fresh out of college, newly married, and I was looking for a job. And I had a friend who'd been working in the air filtration industry. So you have residential air filters that most people are at least somewhat familiar with. Maybe you have an air filter in the ceiling, and hopefully at some point you're changing that air filter on a regular basis. Most people forget. So one thing we can do is set reminders to make sure that you do change those air filters, and there's many reasons why. But I had an opportunity to join an organization who was an early visionary on the importance of indoor air quality and made massive investments into it. And that was an organization called Daikin. It's almost 100-year, I think it's a 100-year-old business now, largest HVAC company in the world. I was in their indoor air quality division. It was one of the 3 pillars of their business. They had air conditioning, they had chemicals that support air conditioning units running, they had indoor air quality. And so I had an opportunity to be exposed to so many ways that indoor air quality affects us as human beings. And I became extremely passionate about it, and passionate about the ideal, because it's one thing to pursue indoor air quality. It's another thing to validate whether or not you actually have it. And so as I went across that journey, trying to make so many positive changes in the world, and we were on a mission to be able to do well while doing good, I found out that as sensor technologies became more and more available, and this is 15 years into my career, I'm now 20 plus years into it, sensors that used to cost $10,000 now cost a few $100s. We could deploy them in more places. And what I found out was that the traditional ways of trying to solve for air quality problems weren't actually making a measurable difference in the places where we live, laugh, work, love, and play, with a rare exception being like a clean room. So where they manufacture pharmaceutical drugs or nutraceutical drugs or medical devices or microchips. If you had a few $100 million, we can make sure you had clean air. So I became a little bit frustrated with the promise versus the proof, and went looking for something that could flip that on its head and deliver proof instead of promises.
Very interesting. You mentioned like a clean room. Actually, how I learned, or how I was connected with PuriFi Labs actually earlier last year, through a couple different friends. I work with firefighters quite a bit for their detoxification, infrared saunas. It's something that I'm very passionate about. It's helping our first responders. And a firefighter, I think he's a union president in the Phoenix area, Brian.
Yes.
He's the one who shared, there's an environment where it's just loaded with carcinogens, and they're constantly bringing them back to the environment. And so they wanted a system in their fire station, their firehouse, that they could feel safe and comfortable breathing in. And so that's just one example. But we went on this whole tangent conversation about hospitals and cruise ships and all these different areas in which that you would think are, a concentrated area where a lot of people are gathering, or where it's important. But like in our home, as you said, 90% of our time is spent in our home. So focusing on where we sleep, where we breathe, where the kids play, all of those things, vitally important. So what catalysts, I guess, have you found that people have decided that they need to clean up the air in their home? Now, I mentioned mold. I'm sure there are allergens. What are you finding that are the most common reasons people are looking to purify their homes?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that there's a difference between where they start and what they learn across
Mm,
that journey. Usually they start somewhere with a trigger. So, and that trigger could be dust. And sometimes it may not be an acute physical response, but they're seeing too much dust in their home. They're
mm,
dusting way too frequently in their home, according to whatever they think life should look like. And they recognize that dust is a bad thing and at a very high level. Some other things could be, they have pets. The pets have odors. Odors are particles, or particles are odors. Arizona State University proved that. So when you smell something, it's a particle. So that's something that you can
mm.
actually breathe in. You can consume. I'm not saying you want to, but that's what odors are. And then as you go beyond that, so they may start there and they start looking into the information. They get some education, hopefully some good education on how to deal with or solve those problems and the impact on their health. Other people may be more acute. They have an allergy issue. They have an inflammatory response to something. It could be asthmatic. It could be breathing. It could be sleep. I'm just not sleeping well. My throat is dry. I'm coughing in the middle of the night. Then they start peeling the onion back to say, okay, what could be contributing to these issues? Air is one of those things. And then they're going to drill down to it. And if they have an opportunity to come to, say, a place like the PuriFi Experience Center in Scottsdale, they can get an extremely detailed education on what's really in the air. Why are those things triggering these inflammatory responses? And then ultimately, how do we deal with them?
Yeah, I had the opportunity. I don't know if you know this, but I was in Scottsdale last month, and my husband and I stopped in and saw Terry and saw the group, and we had the opportunity to check out the experience room. And what an experience it was. I know in our own homes, we get comfortable with the aromas and like our own home odor. So when you go into, say, a retail store or you go to somebody else's home, everybody knows what it smells like to go to grandma's house or,
Yeah.
somebody who's maybe been living in a home for decades upon decades. But the experience room was interesting because to me, what it was, and you can clarify, is it was just a regular living room, like a home setup with relatively newer, regular furnishings. And you could literally smell the difference as soon as that door opened. Like
Yeah.
you're walking in, we're hanging out in the lobby, gorgeous, gorgeous space, by the way. And then you step into the experience room, and right away, my husband, Mark, says, "Oh my gosh." He goes, "This smells like every furniture store I've ever been in, or everybody else's home that maybe you're not used to." He's like, "You don't realize it until you focus on it or you put energy on it and you're thinking about it." It like hit me in the face.
Mm.
And so I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit about like maybe some of the particles and things that are living in our furniture. I don't want to scare or freak people out. Everyone's throwing everything away, but just to be mindful of what's in our homes.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple aspects of that. One, I'm glad you had a chance to come to the PuriFi Experience Center. We do give you a chance to come into clean air, and then you get that contrast when you go into the experience room, and it really is being like hit in the face. And when I walk in there, I feel like a headache's coming on, just because
Yeah.
there's so much off gassing and stuff that's pungent, and you can sense it. In addition to all the measuring devices that I'm sure you saw, where we have lasers that visualize all the particles that are in the air. So they
Yeah.
make things that were invisible are now visible to your naked eye. So you get the ability to see and understand that. But, as it relates to our homes, we'll be hard pressed to get away from pollution. We're not going to be able to get away from it completely. Can we make better choices? Can we choose hardwood or tile floors instead of carpets? Yes, we can absolutely do that. Can we choose maybe leathers as opposed to cloths from a particle perspective? Yes, but those furniture materials are going to have off-gassing properties. So we're making these trade-offs, and certainly we can make some decisions that are better for our specific needs or desires than others. That being said, we're going to have to bring something into the room to deal with it.
Mhm.
And the reason being is the particles that are most threatening to our health, most triggering to our biological responses, are so small and so light that they say stay suspended in the air, according to the CDC, for up to 41 hours. So
Mm.
41 hours, that's a really long time. That's 2 days. So the most threatening particles are just floating around, up to 41 hours. The only time they really dissipate is if the room has been left alone. So then eventually they might be able to settle, but typically they never do, because when are we ever just sitting still for 41 hours in our house? That's probably not a good look. And so what we have to do is bring something into the room to deal with that. And that's what PuriFi does. PuriFi turns every register in someone's home into an air purification device, because it goes in the central HVAC system. We send these really long life cold plasma ions into the space, and they essentially sweep up those tiny particles via an attraction principle, kind of like magnets. When you put magnets together, they attach to each other. If you have a positive and a negative, versus when you have a positive, they tend to force each other apart. We have both positive and negative ions because particles in the air are both positively and negatively charged. And so what they do is they attack and find their opposite. They either neutralize the threat in VOCs or bacterias or viral particles, or they agglomerate those tiny particles and make them large enough so they can actually make it on the return air current that's trying to suck air up to your air filters and get them out of your breathing zone.
I love that. And one of the things I love about the PuriFi device, one of the options is you actually have a way of tracking it. Now, you mentioned in the experience room, everything was on display. It was refreshing to see actual information in it in real time in front of you. And that's what your in-home devices do. So can you share, explain a little bit about how that works and how somebody would be tracking that? I know you have two options. One is that you can track it on like an app or a phone, and the other is you just hook it up for those that maybe don't want to have the Wi-Fi devices. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned previously as the ability to track, test, and hopefully prove better performance came out, 8 to 10 years ago, it started to become less and less expensive. What we were deploying were particle sensors, and they're measuring really 3 ranges of particle sizes. There's 3 ranges that matter. They're tracked by the EPA. They're tracked by the World Health Organization. They're called PM1, PM2.5, and PM10. PM just means particulate matter. The number is a size. And particles are so small, they're measured in something called microns or micrometers. And a micron is 1/39,000th of an inch in diameter. So the diameter of a human hair is about 70 micrometers. So you think about the diameter, you can hardly see the diameter of a human hair. We're dealing with particles that are 1 micron in size, 70 times smaller than that. And at the high end, 7 times smaller than that. So what we're tracking is particles. PM1 is 0.5 to 1 micron particles. Those are going to get all the way down into your lungs and your bloodstream. They're not coming back out. PM2.5, those are going to get into your upper respiratory system, and they're going to lodge in there as well. One of the things to think about as it relates to PM2.5 particles is they're about 20 times bigger than LDL cholesterol. Consequently, that's why there's all this research that's come out that talks about how there's a massive connection between cardiovascular risk and heart attacks and poor health in that area and air pollution. I mean, if we're worried about cholesterol clogging our arteries and these particles are 20 times bigger and we're breathing 3,000 gallons of air every day, there might be a billion of those particles that we're breathing in every day or more, you start to connect the dots. Then we measure PM, particulate matter 3 to 10 micron or PM10. Those are irritants. Those are triggers. So that's going to be nose, throat, typically, and it's going to trigger allergic responses or asthmatic responses. And asthmatic responses will also be triggered by PM2.5 as well. When you get beyond that, our body has an ability to breathe in and breathe out because the particles are large enough. So you might actually breathe in a 20 micron particle, but it'll come back out. The others won't. So our sensors measure all 3 of those buckets of size. They put them on a dashboard on your phone, and then we do another calculation that most people don't ever have, and that's your indoor air quality index. We take the formula that you get on your weather app or you see on your computer, or some vehicles are even putting an AQI, an outdoor AQI on their dashboard. We take that same formula from WHO, from the EPA, and we provide an indoor air quality index. And in our experience, we are 50 to 100 times better than outdoor air, let alone the improvements that are made in indoor air.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so important, as you mentioned, just the ability to see that something is improving or to have certainty. I guess I think that's one of the
Yeah.
things that's important to people, especially now, there's so much information online. There's so many claims and so many different companies and people saying like, this is the best and you should go with us. And here's why. When really, I think people get into analysis paralysis for one, because they're not sure who to believe, and they're not sure, is this thing actually working? And I don't mean to throw any other brand under the bus by any stretch, but let's say like a portable air doctor or some of these portable devices. So many of them on the market nowadays. I get asked all the time, Jen, which one do you recommend? Which ones do you think are good? And I'm like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Are there some companies that I think are integral and doing things with the right intentions? Absolutely. But blowing the air around, I'm not sure, and some of the filters. So can you, from a comparison standpoint, obviously these are not apples to apples. One is a whole system that's in your home, but some people are looking at just a concentrated space. Maybe it's a nursery, maybe it's their bedroom or something that's very important. And they're looking to just clean up the air in that space. How would you say the PuriFi system compares to like a more common portable device?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's important for people to understand just a little bit about pollution and airflow and how it operates inside of our homes. One of the most important things to understand about the air and the pollutants in the air is they will always travel the path of least resistance. And so think about that for a second. Let's say we do have a nursery. We want the air quality. I have 4 children. I've always wanted to do the best that I can for them, their health, their wellness, their progress, their growth. And we decorate the nursery, you get it ready, but then also you want to make sure that the air is clean. Well, anytime you open that door or leave that door open or have any space under the door jamb, there is airflow that is coming into that space. So when you only have a single zone inside of your home that you're trying to control, you're going to have to seal off that entire room and run in and out to try to not pollute it. So, like if it's literally a nursery, you're going to run in, you're going to grab the baby and you're going to run back out and you're going to shut the door and you're going to jam a towel under the door jamb. Is that realistic? Are any of us really going to live like that? No. So the alternative then becomes, okay, so I'm going to treat my entire home. I'm looking at portable units. I'm not going to run in and out of spaces. I'm not going to seal every door. How many do I need then?
Right.
Well, shoot, you take a 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom home. You got about 20,000 cubic feet of space. I need to treat all of that room by room. You might need 10 to 20 in-room devices, and then maybe your air starts to get clean, but you'll also want to put sensors in to validate that it's happening. Otherwise, why did I invest all this money?
Right.
But now you have a noise pollution problem. So like some of us, me included, I like a little white noise when I go to sleep. I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way, but the silence is a little too much for me. So I like a little white noise, but I don't like 20 in-room devices of white noise. I mean, that's like tornado status inside of the home. So when you start asking yourself these questions, you go, well, shoot, what's the alternative then? How do I deal with this? Well, now let's talk about PuriFi as an alternative strategy. We're going to take the airflow that already exists inside of your home. We're going to blanket your space with the same ions that exist in nature. If you stand by a waterfall, it's some of the highest concentration of ions that you'll ever breathe. If you're on the beach in the ocean, I grew up in San Diego. I love the ocean. I love how I feel when I leave the ocean. Maybe some other people are like that too. Or when you're out in high elevations, ion counts are higher because there's less pollution to fight. And you have a bunch of foliage in nature that are generating ions. You have a higher ion concentration. You tend to feel better. The air tends to be cleaner. We're taking those same ions, distributing them through every vent in the home, attacking pollution throughout the space, full saturation, full protection, and getting the pollutants out of the breathing zone, plus neutralizing odors, volatile organic compounds. And when you think about volatile organic compounds, like formaldehydes and things like that, if you get an in-room air cleaner, you're going to have a carbon air filter on top of the standard air filter. You're going to have to replace those air filters. So we just say, look, instead of trying to suck the pollution out of the room, let's bring the solution to the pollution. And then let's prove that we actually dealt with it via sensors and apps on your phone. And, we guarantee cleaner air, or we'll take your product back.
Right.
It's as simple as that. And we've had 0 product returns in 10 plus years.
I was just going to ask that question. So
Mhm.
I'm like, does anybody ever been? I mean, that's a fair question, I'm sure. But I should mention I have a PuriFi system in our home. I love it. We've always been very mindful. We bought a new home about 4.5 years ago. kind of left the city, got out of all of the pollution, the noise, the EMF, the environmental, everything to get back into the country and get back in nature. And so we live in the trees now, which I'm very grateful for. That in and of itself just oxygenates the air. Windows open, you enjoy the peace. But, there are some farms nearby and there are some things. Plus, of course, I have furniture and we have 2 cats and we have things inside our home. And so when I found PuriFi, it was like, this was next level for me. This was just verifying and guaranteeing that we could have the purest air in the home for us and for our animals and for our guests. And we absolutely love it. My husband, I will say that he very much agrees with many of the things I do, but oftentimes he's just like, okay, what are we doing now? Like, what else is coming into the home? Not only did he experience a difference when we were in the experience room, and he too got an immediate headache from being exposed to that. So he felt that. But I would say it was about 2 or 3 weeks after we had the system installed in our home, we both said we could feel a difference. Now we're energetic beings, so it's kind of hard to describe. And again, I opted to go with the unit that doesn't have all of the tracking, the Wi-Fi tracking. And that's for 2 reasons. One, I probably wouldn't look at it a ton anyways. I just try. I don't need, I trust what it's doing. But 2, I am, to be quite honest, I'm very particular about the amount of EMS and Bluetooth devices that come in the home. So I just opted not to use that, which I love the fact that you have that option. And I think that that's important for people to know. But I'm just curious, you had mentioned some VOCs and some pollutants. Mold comes up a lot. I think a lot of people are finding mold in their homes.
Yeah.
This is where the whole like portable air purification comes in, is they need to just do something. Obviously, a person needs to remediate their home. Otherwise, they're just on a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned, you said, bring the solution to the pollution. I'm going to use that. I love that. I like that a lot. What does the PuriFi system, and I don't want to say how quickly or how fast, but what is the efficacy of bringing in a PuriFi system to a home that was riddled with mold or maybe has a mold exposure?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've learned in 20 plus years is every environment is different. And so given that factor, what I can say is your environment will get better. To what extent and how quickly depends on the level of contamination. To your point, it's very different when you find out from a specialist who's certified to inspect mold inside your home that you have a mold problem behind your walls and it's growing and it's black mold or it's whatever mold. You need to have remediation. That is very different than you have some areas of mold that are starting to develop and they're, problematic, but not pervasive. And I'll give you an example of a personal story. One time, my then, 2-year-old had decided that he thought it would be really fun to bring the hose into the living room while it was on. And I just luckily came down the stairs fairly quickly and he's standing there like, this is the best. I love this. The hose is in the house. Meanwhile, he's soaking our family room. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what does this mean for us? Am I going to have to get remediation? How bad is this? I get the hose off. The room is soaked. I'm trying to dry things with towels and whatnot. I'm pulling up the carpet and I have a box fan that I'm blowing. But within a day, as I'm trying to kind of assess the damage, I've got that smell that tells me I have some microbial things that are growing. And I said, okay, well, let's just run our fans with PuriFi on 24/7 and see what happens. And within 24 hours, after it dried out, so you got to get the humidity out. But after it dried out, within 24 hours, I could stick my nose down to the ground and I smelled nothing. There was no mildew, no whatever other microorganisms existed in the space. And I just moved into a new home a week and a half ago. And the home had some legacy smells and odors inside of it. But I was able to move into the home and think to myself, well, PuriFi will take care of that. And it has. I don't have any odors anymore. So, if you've got serious mold problems, get remediation.
Right.
If you want something to help you prevent those from coming back, PuriFi will inhibit those things based on the test reports that we've done, as well as, the experiences that people have. And then anything that exists inside of your space today, if it's not pervasive and growing through the walls and all those things, PuriFi has the ability to neutralize molds and bacteria and fungi.
Nice. I love the story of your son. That sounds quite amusing and
Yeah.
frustrating all at the same time. It kind of brings me to my thought. I wanted to ask you, I'm sure you've been in this for many years, so you probably have many, but are there any specific testimonials or cases or situations that stand out to you that you want to share? Or maybe it's a specific environment, but anything like a special testimonial?
Yeah, I need to be careful in how I describe it because we can remove triggers. And so that's what I'll say, as a preface. PuriFi removes triggers to asthma and allergy events. When you remove triggers, then you can make progress via your health. But our only job is to remove the triggers, not necessarily say we will improve people's health. But I'll tell you a story about removing triggers that was one of the most powerful for me. And that is, I was first a skeptic before I was a believer in PuriFi. And that goes back 8 years ago when I first met the inventors of the technology, who I have had an opportunity to partner with now. I was running the indoor air quality division at Daikin, and they came to me and they said, hey, we have this technology. If you put it in your duct, it will take care of all these pollutants that you're currently struggling with, and we'll prove it to you with sensors. Now, I had been all over the world, literally, almost every continent. I had 600 engineers in Osaka, Japan, plus our team domestically, all looking for new ways and strategies to solve indoor air quality problems. And so my response was, yeah, sounds amazing. You're gonna have to prove it to me. And they put it in my home in Louisville, Kentucky. Well, after they installed it, all my odors went away. I lived in Louisville, high humidity. My basement odors, gone. My particle count reduced by 90% in 4 hours. And I'm looking at this and going, okay, this is real. So then I start investigating it because I wanted at that point in time to acquire the company. Now, not to say that they were necessarily ready to sell at the time, but that was my objective. I wanted to buy the company. And so I got it into our CEO's home and our CFO's home. Well, our CFO, he has a son named Max. At that time, Max was 5 years old, and he was using nebulizers and inhalers every single day inside of his home. They had air purifiers in every room. And this is the story from his wife, as told by our CFO's wife, Ann Mintman, at the time. And she's essentially saying, no matter what I do, I cannot make a measurable, meaningful difference for my son in removing these triggers. Well, after installing PuriFi, within a week, Max's trigger events went down so much that he stopped using his inhaler or his nebulizer at his house. The only time he had to use it was when he went to his grandparents' house, and his grandparents immediately got PuriFi and put it in their home because they're like, oh my gosh, we want our environment to be as good for Max as it is for him at home. And Ann's story was, with an air purifier in every single room, I couldn't change the trigger dynamics for Max. But once PuriFi was installed, so many triggers were removed and proven to me with data and apps. We then saw massive progress for Max via inhalers and nebulizers. So that for me is one of my favorite stories. I mean, who more important or sensitive to us as a society than children?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely powerful. And we had mentioned nurseries. That's definitely oftentimes when people are contacting or reaching out to me, it's because of their kids. It's for their kids. And I don't want to say that we're not as important as adults, but there's probably, and I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to this, but just kind of speaking through the lens of talking to many parents, there's not a whole lot that's more frustrating than when you can't find a solution for something when your child is suffering. And every day people are, again, reaching out, asking like, where can I get this? Because they're looking to bring more quality of life to their children and to their family. And something like allergy or asthma or something that's triggering like that is something where you can see a measurable difference. It's not just me saying, oh, I kind of feel better, or I sense something. That's a very trackable, traceable case study. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that that's going to be very helpful for a lot of people. So on that note, I know we covered a lot. Is there anything else that you want to particularly share? I could talk about air quality all day long, actually. I love that. I love it because I think it's so important. But is there anything else that you think would be important for listeners to know?
Yeah, I mean, one thing came up is just as you were talking about children and being willing to do anything for your children and being frustrated when you feel like you can't solve the problems for your children. I have a very personal experience from that when I was 7 years old, almost 8 years old. And my mom was a young mother. She was 28, maybe 29 at the time. And we were in my doctor's office for probably the sixth, seventh time in several weeks to maybe a couple months. And because I just wasn't well, struggling to breathe, feeling lethargic, not feeling well, starting to gain weight in ways that wasn't typical for me, or water weight, etc. We're sitting in the doctor's office. I'm sitting on that crinkly paper that we've all sat on before, right? And I'm sitting there, the pediatrician's there, my mom is there, and he's about to send me home with another incorrect reason for why I am suffering and struggling. There's a bug going around. Here's some more antibiotics. Here's a different one to try. And my mom had had enough. And I'm sitting there in this room, and she just leaves. She just walks out. She just walks out of the doctor's office. And I'm sitting there with the pediatrician. And even at 7, I'm like, this is pretty awkward, because I don't know what's going on, but she apparently isn't real thrilled with what you have to say. And she comes back in with a different doctor, and she's got this woman by the lab coat. And she's dragging her into this doctor's office. And she says something that I personally will never forget. She says, something is wrong with my son and he can't see it. Help me figure it out. And this doctor, Dr. Cadota, she listens to my heart. She says, I think we should get a chest x-ray. We get a chest x-ray. She makes the invisible visible. And she says, I think you need to get down to Children's Hospital in San Diego right away. It appears that your son has a tumor in his chest, and it's fairly large. So you need to get down there and get a biopsy. My husband is an oncologist at Children's Hospital. Go see him. I'll call ahead. I'll do what I can. So we immediately hop in the car. We get down to Children's Hospital. And after all of the pokes and the prods and, the analysis, they say, your son has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This is in 1989. It's stage 3. Prognosis isn't great because it's progressed so far, but we have an experimental treatment protocol, and we think we can get him into the study. It's going to be 9 months of chemo and radiation and continued chemo after that. It's going to run about 2.5 years, assuming we get that far. And a couple of things came out of that. One, I realized what you can't see can absolutely hurt you. And as I got further into my life and into the world of indoor air quality, I found out that that is one of those things that can absolutely hurt you. Now, gratefully, that experimental treatment program worked, but not in isolation. My family dove deep into holistic wellness and immune support and inflammatory reduction because, and I'm no doctor, the chemo kills things, the bad things, but also the good things too. And so via nutrition and in as much as we knew about environment at the time in 1989, 1990, 91, and supplements, I was able to survive the chemo so that the chemo could help me survive, period. But I think if we want to not just survive, but thrive, we have to think about invisible things. What's going on inside of our body? What's going on in our environments? And recently, the indoor air quality world has turned more to IEQ, even more than IAQ, indoor environmental quality, which encompasses so many other facets. And I found out later in life that the condominium complex I grew up on as a child was built over a landfill and nobody said anything about it.
Oh my gosh.
So does the environment absolutely affect our health and well-being? 100% it does.
Yeah.
How much we decide to understand that environment and take action for what we can make an impact on, that's on us. And I'm grateful to say that I have an opportunity to be part of an organization who can make proven positive change in those environments on a variety of factors, in addition to any others that we may want to pursue as people in our homes and businesses.
Oh my gosh, Jerry, that was quite the story. Thank you for sharing. I'm grateful that you were open enough to share something so personal. And I absolutely think that you are making an impact, and you've definitely made an impact today by sharing that and sharing everything else that you can about PuriFi and how we can improve the air quality inside of our homes. Where can people find you, connect with you, connect with PuriFi?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. PuriFiLabs.com is our website, heavily focused on the technology. and education around the technology and the product. PuriFiStore.com is a website where you can have some information about the technology, but also the experience center. You have an opportunity to see and understand, what can you learn and experience at the PuriFi Experience Center in Scottsdale, which is at the Scottsdale Promenade in North Scottsdale. If anybody is ever in Arizona, me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram, Jerry McGuire or the Jerry McGuire, and happy to connect with anyone if they have any questions or want to discuss things in more detail. We love to support and help people make the progress that they want to make in their lives.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm grateful to be connected to you as well. We'll definitely stay in touch. And I love that your handle is the Jerry McGuire. That's fun as well.
Yeah, I have to differentiate myself somehow. Otherwise, people just show me the money. I say, let me help you.
I know. I told Mark, my husband, this morning, I said, I've got a podcast recording today with Jerry McGuire. And he goes, oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm sure you get that every day.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But people don't forget my name. So
I was going to say,
it works.
I'm sure that's intentional. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. And we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay, friends and fellow wellness warriors, thanks for tuning in today. If this show was helpful and inspired you, please head over to Apple or Spotify to rate, review, subscribe, and follow us, as well as share it with your friends and family. It's a fantastic way to grow the show, expand my reach, and teach others how to create a vibrant life they love. If you're ready to invest in your health and purchase a Clear Light sauna, hop on over to jenhellerlifestyle.com and send me a note. Thanks again for tuning in. I love you. I'm grateful for you. And I thank you so much for your support. You are the reason I do this work. You are the reason I do this show. And you are the reason I get up every single day with a burning desire in my soul. Cheers to your health and happiness, my friends. We'll see you next week. This podcast is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be substituted for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you think you have a medical condition, consult your licensed physician.